Hey, so nice to meet you, Reza. Thanks again for participating and contributing to these conversations that will be part of the Venice Biennale. Want to give you a second just to introduce yourself and say a little bit about your work.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Reza Nik. I'm an architect based in Toronto, Canada. I'm also an artist and an educator, an assistant professor in the teaching stream at the University of Toronto for the past 7 years. I run a practice called SHEEEP. The SHEEP Studio is the architectural and the art wing of SHEEP, which is a licensed practice where we work on all sorts of projects from temporary public spaces to temporary installations and performances to the more typical home and commercial renovations and projects. And as of last year, we started the educational platform called Sheep School as a collective with four other friends. And Sheep Radio, I've been running a monthly podcast series with other practitioners from around the world to talk about how the struggles and the successes they've had with their practice over the years. And finally, with other friends, we also co-founded the Toronto chapter of the Architecture Lobby in 2020.
So I'm going to start on the questions. This first question is, what was the aha moment when you realized that you needed to do something, and how are you manifesting that now?
There was a few aha moments, I feel, over my career in the past 10 years, 10, 12 years. The first ones, I would say it was after working at various practices in Toronto and globally, and realizing that sort of the environments that I was working in and the processes by which the projects were done or the practice was run was not something that really aligned with my values. So that kind of drove me to think about what alternatives there could be within the practice world. And in 2020 was, I would say, the ultimate aha moment when we all went through COVID and everyone questioning their life, their existence, and their politics, and followed by the murder of George Floyd in the summer of 2020. That was the kind of the moment where one, we started the Toronto chapter of the Architecture Lobby. It was kind of the moment of realizing that as architects, as architectural workers, we do have a voice, and that politics is intertwined with practice and that we should speak to these things. And from the practice side, it was also the year that I started SHEEEP. And it was a moment to think about what does an actual like alternative practice look like if the various 7 to 10 firms that I've worked at over the past 15 years haven't fit the bill of the way that I envision a practice. Like, what does it actually, like, what can I think about when I'm thinking about constructing our own practice? And from the beginning, it was always I always imagined it as a practice that wasn't just me, and that's why it's called SHEEP. It's not Reza Nik Studio, and there wasn't a name attached to it. I did imagine it growing and becoming more of a collective where others are involved, and to kind of like to think about all the other key problems and issues that we have in the profession, which is um, uh, kind of boils down to the processes by which projects are done. So that was really important when I was starting SHEEP, and the list of 20 things that we've called the manual. It's kind of a manifesto of the practice, and that was one of the first things that I wrote out when I really actually didn't know what um, direction I wanted it to go, or what kind of projects I wanted to take on, because I did have a variety of interests, and that has become a foundational uh, kind of literature to refer to when we are thinking about different projects and the direction of the practice. So, and to think about the values that are foundational to the project versus what the projects are at the end of the day. So yeah, that's kind of like where 2020, it was also a moment when thinking about starting a practice in the middle of a pandemic was um, scary, because
Right.
thinking about actually starting any new venture in the middle of a pandemic where we were all locked in, but it kind of proved to be uh, I kind of had to stick to that vision and continue with it regardless because there wasn't much else to do.
Right.
Hmm.
Well, and how would you summarize or distill the problematic processes that you mentioned, like into sort of the core key issues that you see architectural workers facing today?
Um, I would say I mean, from a practical level, it's just the low pay.
Mhm.
Starting pay is, I remember I graduated in 2013. We're in 2025 now, and the starting pay is almost the same as what it was back then, which was already low. I got my first job at 50K per year, Canadian.
Mhm.
Uh, and I have students that are starting projects at large practices in the city that are getting offered 55K
Wow.
within 12 years. And I'm like, and they have more responsibility too. So that's a huge issue where people feel that the return on their investment of like studying for almost 10 years
Yeah.
and going through these processes of licensure and all of that, you are starting at such a low salary where you can barely maintain yourself in this highly inflated and expensive city. Um, so that's been one of it. Another is just the feeling of not um, having value
Yeah.
in a practice or in the processes, thinking about the hierarchies that are traditionally in architectural practices, where it is very much a top-down profession. And at the early entry level um, positions, you are felt like you're treated like you don't know anything, and you are I hear from students all over that it's something that is it's a just a toxic environment. They're not treated with respect, or their ideas are not they're not listened to. um, and this is all not to say that everyone knows everything. Obviously, with time comes experience and things that you just know
Mhm.
more because you've been doing it. And especially in architecture, where it's usually like, even if you've been practicing for 40 years, you're discovering new things that you're like, whoa, I
Yeah.
did not know how to do that. I've never had to deal with that. But also just beginning, like opening up the process a bit more, being a bit more transparent about the practice. Um, and the idea of just sort of, which ties to the hierarchical nature of practice, the decision making that goes into the practice, what kinds of
Mhm.
projects are worked on, what the deadlines are. That's rarely ever discussed with the employees.
Yeah.
Um, so money at the
Yeah.
core of it,
Mhm.
not getting paid enough, not getting treated well,
Yeah.
getting like having to work overtime for free,
Mhm.
unpaid overtime. Um, and those have been, and the kind of the, I guess the last part is just the difficult processes and timeline and resources necessary to actually go through the licensing process
Yeah.
to become a licensed architect in Toronto, which is similar to the US. You have to work for almost 3 years, write exams,
Right.
and it's the support isn't as much there.
Yeah.
The role, like the mentorship culture is actually, from my experience and from what um, students have shared with me and other interns have shared with me, it's kind of faded away. And it
Mm,
is systemic. It's not just like one person um, that's a problem. It's because of just the way that the practice has shaped up to be. It's very problematic the way that it's set up right now.
yeah. Yeah, well, and I think that's a really good segue to this question about sort of advice you might have for people looking to get involved in organizing. They've kind of come to terms with the issues you described, and they want to do something about it. How do you recommend they go about that?
Talking to each other, talking to other coworkers, to friends, opening up, being transparent about their work culture, about their pay, about their benefits, about their um, the projects that they're working on, how is the practice actually run, taking the veil off the internal processes of a practice more versus the end product. And that I think that's not just on the workers or the um, people that are not running these practices, but just as institutions, as far as like publications go, to think about the how a practice is run, um, aside from in addition to how the project turns out.
Right.
So not rewarding practices that are running toxic environments and offices that create quote unquote beautiful spaces or architecture and rewarding them for that. Actually, shining a light on the fact that um, you could get, quote unquote, penalized if you are not running a practice in a way that's equitable.
Yeah.
And you won't receive these kinds of awards because we kind of like the way restaurants run, like there's inspections that happen. Like
Mm,
if it's a rat infested, um, badly run space, they usually shut the doors. But within
yeah.
architectural practices or design practices, it doesn't seem to matter how badly the practices run as long as the end result is beautiful and architectural in a way that we consider beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
thinking about actually talking, providing spaces where and workers can talk and be transparent about these processes in order to actually organize and demand changes.
Mhm. That's really powerful, and that example is so good. It's like, how can the food be good if it's a rat-infested kitchen? So
Mhm.
to really affirm that intuition that's so deeply held by us, like in this profession, and to affirm that in each other, that that's not right, and it doesn't actually lead to a good product. Um,
Mhm.
so just concluding then, and I feel like you touched on this a little bit just in the last question, but how would you describe your vision for the future of architecture?
Um, I would, I would love there to be excitement for the profession again, especially within the younger generation. I still maintain that hope. I'm trying to maintain that hope by running an alternative
Mm,
space, an alternative practice, an alternative pedagogical institution that is counter in some ways to the traditional means of practice and pedagogy. And that gives me hope. And I hope that that actually opens up other possibilities for others to think about what are these alternative practices
mm,
and how can we practice differently in a way that people are actually excited about the profession without um, feeling that they need to leave it for other disciplines, whether it's for more money or whether it's just to, you know, have a little bit more dignity and respect with their knowledge. And I really hope, I mean, the young generation does give me hope. So the future of architecture to me is, um, it feels good, especially if the younger generation listens to their internal constructive criticisms and um, thinks about how we can begin to change some things. And there's a lot of great people around the world that are kind of paving some paths of these alternative routes. But a part of it is also, I feel the future of architecture in some ways, the less happy future I would say is that it could become less um, important because people start leaving it, and it could end up suffering greatly because the people that are needed to actually maintain and question the practice end up leaving the profession. So it is quite urgent, especially in our current economic and political climates, to actually question the way that we practice. So um, I still maintain hope, and uh, I do hope that there is a bit of criticism, but also injecting it with more playfulness and experimentation to actually bring back that energy that got most of us excited about architecture and why we're in it. Um, so yeah, hopefully.
Yes. Yes, a future of excitement and joy and play. That sounds like a one I would happily accept.
And more collective action, I would say, more
Yes.
collectivity, more cooperative practices
Hmm.
that are um, competing less, uh, and hopefully larger firms letting smaller firms and mid-sized firms to actually do some work instead of trying to hog all the work.
Yep.
So hopefully less greed, but that I feel like that's a larger conversation. I'm not just outside of architecture, it's just um, societal expectations.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, if we're on the hopeful route, like I do see a future in architecture that is more cooperative,
Yeah.
that is a series of smaller practitioners that are actually putting their brains and skill sets together to tackle larger projects versus large 100, 200, 300 person corporate firms.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions and share your insights. It's really valuable and really powerful to hear from you, Reza. Thank you.
thank you so much.